So members, here we're going to look at education standards and supervision. So to supervise and to have standards, which one comes first? Okay, yeah. So we first set the standards and then we supervise based on the standards that we set. So we need to ask ourselves, what are standards? So a standard is a yardstick, a benchmark. You could also decide can be a rule or a guideline. Used as a basis of comparison, measurement, and or judgment. So we have to be with a yardstick or a benchmark. You've seen the height of chalk, the chalk that you use. That height, possibly all the chalk that you use has that very height. That if somebody else was to make a park on a chalkboard somewhere where a piece of chalk can sit, can decide to make one for the whole country, the same template or the same template that fits the whole country, because the height is standard. Otherwise, if you do not have um, those specific yardsticks or benchmarks or specific rules that have got to be followed, then you have nothing to compare with. You can hardly measure, or you can also hardly make decisions. So it represents an agreed upon level of quality, performance, specification, or conduct. So to set a standard, we have to agree on what do we consider to be quality and what do we consider not to be quality. What do we consider to have for someone who has performed? What are those specific things that person should have done for us to say that person is highly performing, and the other one is is performing at a low uh, rate? So you've got to have to know. We sit and agree that at the end of primary one, the learner should be able, at the end of top class, the learner should be able to read a story. That one you agree upon it, and then you define which stories, which words specifically should that person be able to read. Okay. Encyclopedia. Should the learner be able to read encyclopedia? So you have got to define what specifically that person should do, should be able to. So, yes, yeah, should be able to read these specific words. We could also agree upon conduct and say, okay, when you are a teacher, the, we agree that you should not come to class and smoke a cigarette in the class. That is agreed upon. So not smoking cigarette becomes the standard. Upon which you base to know, to see, do people smoke or they don't. So when we are to set standards, standards are set after a complete assessment and scrutiny of the quality requirements. And the needs that should be met. What do we require to deliver the quality? So when we have these standards, we shall be able to achieve effective and efficient outcomes. So we are very careful with the word outcome. Other people say result. What do you want to achieve at the end? Then that will tell you what will be the requirements to achieve it, and what should each requirement have in terms of uh, specifications. Specify each requirement so that the outcome that is expected is actually met. So we should be able to, yes. Yes, quality requirements tell us resources. Yeah. It, in quality requirements, you have material and non-material requirements. So the material requirements are like the ones you're saying, the resources. Which resources? Yes, the infrastructure, finances. The finances can also be part of that. Mm. Although you may not necessarily set a standard that you should have 50 million shillings in the pocket to say that you are going to have quality. But what you can do is to make sure you you set the we call them minimum requirements for quality, below which if you don't meet them, we say you do not have the quality requirements. Uh, you're expected to have hygienic toilets, and then those toilets have got to be separated, female and male, for you to operate a school. There are also infrastructure requirements like building, the space that each learner needs at least uh, uh, 0.5 square meters to occupy. So if you have a class which is smaller than that number, you say you're not meeting the space requirements. Then a room where learning is going to take place has minimum requirements for illumination, which is light. You find some classes where learners study, and when they get out, the eyes are like they are stretching to cope with the sunshine, the intensity of light. Mean there is no balance between internal light and external. Mm. Then there are environmental requirements, which environment we call it learning environment, which has play, resources, learning resources. The learning environment has play resources, hygiene resources, safety resources, then staff capacity resources. Those are human resource capacity. So quality standards will also spell for you what are the minimum requirements for a staff to engage in teaching learners. But if one came and found that you do not have those minimum requirements and you're teaching, then can predict, can say the quality is not in place. Mm. You're expected to have a play center, right? Indoor and outdoor in the school, and you do not have. That means that what learners would have got after playing, they will not get because they are not playing. So then we say that they are lacking those qualities. You're expected to have registered, okay, the school to comply with the provisions of the country. You are operating the school and you're not registered or licensed. Then we say possibly you're not meeting quality. Mhm. This, yes, it even goes to content requirements. Content. We find you like in Uganda, you cannot teach learners how to operate a gun in a secondary school or a primary school or elsewhere unless you have registered as an army school. So achieve what we want is we want to expect outcomes and be able to know what will be the end with yes results after all activities are taken have been done. So in standards, we actually say we are able to tell what will be done and what will come. We don't want to be surprised. So how it should look, how it should function and perform, we have to know in advance. So you could say you're setting an education standard that for example, if it is a driving school, by end of month one, the person should be able to drive on both double lanes and one ways, not highways. So you find that person is in month one and is on the highway. Then you say that person is going to make an accident because he has not yet reached the quality expectations to drive on the highway. And then you find that the person is after month one but cannot drive even on one way or two way. Then is below the what? The standard. So you can use that to judge efficiency and effectiveness of workforce, or even the resources that are available, or even the capacity of learning, of the ability to learn of a student. So standards unify the outcome to be regularly the same. We want to say the outcome should be regularly the same or uniform, regardless of what, when, who is actually doing them. The same subject that you were teaching in that school has been taught for hundreds of years, and the people were getting that very what? That very knowledge. Why? Because they have standardized that content. It is the same. So anything that is lacking in the standard makes the standard sub-standard. That's why when one is setting standards has got to exhaust these requirements and these specifications so that the standards again do not become sub-standards, but people are using them as standards. So what happens if we operate without standards? Operating without standards makes whatever we do, the outcomes unpredictable. So every time you'll be chasing, what is this again you are doing? The things you're doing, you don't understand them. There is a way you do them. And when you ask which way, you may not be able again to define. And then you say, which proper way should they be? But I think you need to improve. You have to define so that you are able to predict. With the standards, we predict the outcomes. We should be able to predict them. When we do not have standards, we become irregular. Okay, you don't have a standard time of arrival of staff, which works for everybody. So when I arrive at 4 p.m., I am early at 4 p.m. Yes. It is until you standardize and set uh, um, regularity schedule. Otherwise, if you don't even standardize schedules of break time, some learners are in break time, others are starting with the lesson, and these ones who are in the lesson are pimping to see what the other ones are actually doing. There's ununiform. The outcomes would not be uniform. You'll find some of the learners are so skilled. This year, learners are so skilled because they were given some content, and when next year came, you changed you set another standard, and then keeps on changing, so you lose the uniformity. You use even untimeliness, inefficiency, effectiveness. You can start to disagree. You cannot connect, like there is a mismatch. If you don't set even standard less subjects to be taught, when learners transcend to secondary, they will struggle to find what to study, because what they are studying in secondary is so disconnected from what is in the primary school. And then whatever they are answering in secondary, the secondary teacher is saying, you are wrong, you are wrong, you can't say that, who taught you that? Yet you explain, you expect that primary content should do what? Should do help the learner in understanding secondary content, and it is just an addition other than, yes, other than a discardment. Just imagine if your phone, your chargers were not standard, then you would be, every phone would be having its own charger, that when you lose it, you have to buy another phone. But you lose the charger, you go and buy another charger, because it has been made with a standard equivalent to the other one you lost. So they are compatible. They can grip into each other. So when we have outcomes, we become predictable, regular, uniform, timely, there's efficiency, and all those others. This one would have been untransferable. Mm. So a learner who is in primary one of a school in Kapchorwa can fit in primary one of a school in Kampala. That is if they are following the same standards. Mm.
But again, now that one, well, I don't know whether it is the schools in Captura that do not measure up to the agreed upon standards that by P1 a learner must have achieved this. Because in most cases, when you get a child from Captura and bring that child to Elite, chances are very high that that child will have to get back a step below. Likewise, teachers, I have seen in most cases, a teacher you cannot easily transfer teacher from maybe Kayunga where I teach to Namagunga. You cannot.
Then that means there are differences in standards.
Or they create their differences. It's quite funny because we all went through the same training.
Mm.
Now, what brings in that difference? The exposure, environment.
But are they really given space in those schools?
Let me say, if one can get a transfer to Namagunga, in most cases, that person will be rejected. Bagalera, somebody who is from schools that are almost at the same level, Namagunga, Budon, nabbingo naye ova eri ewaffe ebangulira
So
gyotagala.
yes.
Before getting us there, when we talk of with the standard outcomes, and I want to talk in terms of good performance, where should I have that?
Performance.
With the standards, we expect outcomes like excellent results.
Mm.
Me, I would think if one is predictable, if one is regular, if one is timely, the end result would be good results
Mm.
or good performance. So if you are unpredictable, definitely your performance will not measure up the expected outcomes.
Mm. So that is it. If we are not here, if we are here, then we cannot expect good outcomes. If we are here, then we expect good outcomes. We with the standards. You see, even the people who are making those doors, they have standard sizes that you can order for a door, and the person chooses not to come and measure this one, but produces exactly what will fit in it, because the one who is building the whole building is putting the door space following the standards for their doors. Even those switches, the the height at which they are placed are made as standards. Otherwise, you will come and stretch the hand and the switch is so far away. That height there is standard. So, it works for tall people and those who are average height. So even content is made in such a way that it can be able to accommodate most learners. You will read a book and you know this person who is writing has excluded the female. Or the exam, the person who is writing has excluded the male, or has concentrated in Western and has excluded the Northern. Ainebyona then Nukundo Muhozi. See, then appeal a change, but for us we don't do this or what. It's, until you set a standard and say the paper shall be balanced with names. If where names are used, they should cover the regions of the country. Now, standard processes. This is a process you follow in establishing and following through standards. This first step is set quality standards. Other people put the word standard formulation of standards. Process, this is process for standard. Yes. So whatever we call a standard, we make it a little hard to adjust. we make it hard to adjust a standard. Otherwise, if a standard is variable anytime, then it is not a standard. What makes standards is that they become fixed for a very longer period of time.
How is it related to a policy, or how does it deviate from a policy?
Yes, standards.
Standard and policy.
Standards inform policies. Because a standard will tell you what do we expect. Then the policy says what must be. So if we expect that the teacher in the standards, the teacher should teach learners to master a concept. The policy puts it as a rule. The teacher must, and the teacher shall endeavor to. The standards are the ones we base on to create the policies. So meaning without standards, then you cannot create a policy, because a standard actually is an emphasis, is what you use as an ingredient. If you set a standard that every school must have a play center, then even if it is not in the school policy and it is a national standard, they must have it. So you will not license them to operate without unless they show it. So for the government, a standard becomes a policy. For the school, they have got to comply to the national standards, so they should become their policies. But even if they do not embrace them in their own internal policy, they must comply. So this is
Mr. Samuel, there are times, for example, some schools, actually most of those new performing schools, they normally come up with their own standard. But to a certain extent, there is a way they are being unfair to some learners or students, let me say. I give an example of like St. Mary's, to show their own standard. There is a class of students they expect to join. But remember, we have these others who may not be able to reach that standard, but they are good performers, for example. How best can we help such?
it is until you see the schools are also allowed to set their own standards, but those standards schools set in organized environments, when the schools set their standards, those standards have got to be reviewed by the standard setter, because standard setting would be mainly the role of the government. Then other people can set standards, but those standards should be in direct agreement with what the government standards are. But here in our communities, people set their own standards, and the government is like, yeah, you go ahead. If people come to you, let them come. If they choose not to come, you will adjust. And when they continue going, they consider it like people are in agreement with what is set there. But just as you're saying, it is an isolative way. Though even standards should be used to unselect.
And even to make matters worse, the environment, the surrounding environment, is not even benefiting. You rarely find a kid within the environment studying from them.
That is so they have hiked their benchmark. If they suffocate with lack of students, they will adjust the standards. But now that they are getting,
They have a flat.
yeah, they have.
Actually, SMAP has opened another branch in Kabuchi.
Mm.
So they were sending most of their applicants to
But,
study.
but I've been told that in Cambodia they are having only arts,
Hey,
HSC arts.
I didn't know.
Sciences have remained this way,
Well,
So
the traditional campus.
we have to indicate here the specific targets.
so
The,
has opened another school.
the target. You set the standards and the indicators of success that those standards are being met. What indicates that the standards are met? We call them indicators of success or targets that the goals are being achieved. Then train stakeholders. This stakeholder training is very key so that the stakeholders are aware of their standards. In a school environment, we shall see various stakeholders and their roles in maintaining quality standards, which otherwise you would also say their contribution to quality, which involve internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. They have here monitor. This is monitoring what? The standards. And actually at this level where standards have been set, the stakeholders are trained, this one is where you would see supervision coming in place. So to ensure that these standards are followed by stakeholders and that they are also made as expected, then you have got to set up a supervisory what? Team or a standard management team. From top to bottom for quality assurance throughout the education process. So as they implement uh, these standards, then you've got to, after some time, you've got to periodically review performance of stakeholders and the outcomes in the client, our client is now the learner, in relation to community. Members here we should not ignore because our core problem is in the community. So where we set standards here, these standards should not just satisfy us in the school and see that we are performing highly when we see the learner is speaking the English language or is writing very well. We have to be in direct coordination with the society. The problems of the society have got to be solved using a tool called education.